Hello everybody and welcome to today's BCS ELITE meeting, embracing the opportunities of today to enable the digital workforce of tomorrow. We've got 5 amazing speakers lined up for you. We've got Kat Murray-Clark and Robert Van Tool from Spark, which is the strategic design consultancy for BJSS. We've got Simeon Banks from Pure Technology Group and Laura Lancaster from Manchester Airport Group, and we've got Chemek Koska from Diversity Travel. When they've given their speeches, their talks, we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So on your panel at the side of your screen, there is a questions or a chat function. If you can enter in any questions that occur to you as the webinar progresses, please do so, and we can collate them and ask them of the speakers at the end, before the webinar finishes at 5 o'clock. So we're looking forward to their take on this very current topic, and I'll hand over now. Kat Murray-Clark, thank you very much.
Hi everyone. As John said, I'm Kat, and it is really, really nice to meet you. I know that I can't necessarily see you, but I'm still really excited to be here to be able to share with you today. So I'm a service designer at Spark and BGSS, and today I'm going to talk to you about how we can bring more energy, play, physicality, and connection into our remote working. So I just wanted to start this talk by admitting something to all of you. I'm exhausted. When we first started to go on lockdown and we moved our entire lives onto these tiny, tiny video screens, this kind of tableau of Brady Bunch faces, I moved everything online. I moved all of my work, all my meetings, all my workshops. I do a lot of workshops as a service designer. I moved all of them onto video. I also moved all my personal life, and I'm sure many of you are the same. I've probably done maybe 400,000 pub quizzes now with my family, an extended family that I don't even know were family. I've done so many things. And after those first few weeks, I just couldn't really take it anymore. I was so tired. And it was a particular kind of tired, this particular kind of Zoom fatigue or video fatigue that I'm sure we've all experienced. And I wanted to understand a little bit about that. I wanted to understand why it is that it is so exhausting, why it's so hard for us to build energy and connection, why it's so hard for us to be able to connect with one another over video. I mean, I'm an extrovert. I love speaking to people. It's how I get all of my energy. But on video, it just comes so much more tiring. So I started to investigate this. I started with myself and I asked around. I asked a lot of experts. I asked a lot of different people and different expertise. And I wanted to understand why it's so tiring and what we could potentially do to build more of that energy back into these connections, into our remote working lives. And I discovered that it's exhausting for 3 reasons. It's exhausting because it's affecting us mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's affecting us mentally because we've lost all of the non-verbal cues that we used to have, and now our minds are doing all of the work. It's affecting us physically because we're not present with ourselves or with each other. And it's affecting us emotionally because it is so much harder to build empathy and connection over video. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to think about these 3 areas of our lives. And I wanted to give you all some tips, some short exercises, some things you could take away today that would help you to bring more energy into these parts. And my #1 top tip that I want to share with you all today, my kind of cure-all for everything, the thing that I am such an evangelist about, my #1 thing is to do a whole person check-in at the beginning of your workshops, at the beginning of your meetings, at the beginning of any interaction that you're having on video. And what do I mean by a whole person check-in? So what I mean by that is a kind of very simple exercise, a kind of round table where you go around in a circle, or on video, you would kind of nominate one person after the other, and you just check in with them. You just ask them a simple question. And it's not the kind of question like, what did you do on your weekend? Or how are you cutting your hair? God, mine is so long at the moment. This is a specific check-in. And these are check-ins that ask a question that allows the people that you ask to be a little bit more vulnerable, to share a little bit about themselves. And it could be a question like, what's one thing you hope to get accomplished at today's meeting? It could be, what are you excited about or worried about in relating to today's session? What are you grateful for today? Or going a little bit further, what's your personal weather status? Are you cloudy? Are you foggy? Is it sunny inside? Us English love to talk about the weather. Or be a bit more playful. What animal would you be if you were an animal today? Or a little bit more uplifting. What's a recent success that you've experienced? These check-in questions are so useful because it allows us to make explicit what was once implicit. So when we used to be together, when we used to go into an office, when we used to go into a big meeting, we would be able to instantly tell a little bit about each other in that room. We could see who was a bit down. We could see everyone's energy, and we could build off each other's energy. But now we just have these floating heads, and it is so much harder to really get to know one another and to really understand where we all are. And this is so much more important now as our boundaries start to blur, as we start to become part-time carers, part-time childminders, as all of our lives start to blur into our work lives. And we all start to struggle a little bit. We have to work so much harder to connect and to build energy over these work remote video calls. So what I want to do today is I want to give you 3 check-in examples that you can do to build energy and connection and be a little bit playful. So first, I want to talk about how it's affecting us mentally. As I said, we've lost these non-verbal cues, and now our minds are doing all the work. The way I describe it is building rapport on video is like moving house with just your left hand. Before, when we were building rapport with people, we did all of it completely subconsciously. We weren't even thinking. I'm sure many of you have had this experience when you walk into a room and you meet someone for the first time and you get chatting and it's like you've known them for years. You have an instant connection. And that's because you're in rapport with that person. Your heartbeat starts to sync up. Your breathing starts to sync up. You start to match and mirror their movements. I cross my arms, you cross your arms, I lean, you lean. We start to connect with each other and build this easy rapport. But on video, we don't really have that. And we have to work so much harder to try and recreate that. We're reading each other's nonverbal cues in our faces. We're reading our tonality of our voice, the intonation. We're starting to reading into the silences on these video calls. We're starting to think, is anyone listening to me? Do they think I'm funny? I bet no one's paying attention. Why do they look over there? Are they laughing at me? We just fill in these spaces and we have to try and work harder. And in that way, it becomes so much more tiring. So my first check-in for you all today is a physical one. And I call it a share and stretch. So this check-in helps us to make explicit what was once implicit and helps us to build that rapport on video. So basically this works as if you're doing the check-in, as you're going around in a circle and you're asking that question, maybe it's, what are you grateful for today? Or what's one success that you want to share? And as you go around and you share that, you do a stretch at the same time. And I would encourage you to do this with me at the same time. So I could do a stretch. It could simply just be like raising your arms and stretching up really high. And if everyone does that with me, I can't see you, so why not? Just stretch. I'm sure you've all been sat down all day. So just stretch up and I will share. One thing I'm grateful for is having amazing leftovers for lunch every single day. And then the next person will share something. What am I grateful for today? I'm grateful for having a really cute dog. I mean, I wish I had a cute dog. I don't. And then they might do a different stretch. So they might do this one. And then everyone on the call, videos on, would do the same stretch. And by doing that same stretch, we are forcing ourselves into rapport. Our breathing starts to get in sync. Our heart rate, we're doing that matching and mirroring. I cross my arms, you cross your arms. We're in rapport. And it gets us physically moving. And when we're physically moving, we're building our energy and we're building our connection with others because we're doing what they're doing. And it's actually much harder to be checking emails at the same time, just texting, talking to someone else, if you have to pay attention long enough to replicate someone's stretch. So it creates more presence as well, which brings me to my next one. How these Zoom calls, these video calls, these go-to webinar calls, how are these affecting us physically? So as I said, we're not present with ourselves or with each other. I'm sure many of you have done this. I've certainly done this probably pretty much every day this week. I wake up early, want to get started on my work, sit down in this old rickety dining table, dining chair setup that is just not fit for purpose, sit down at 7, and it's only at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock when I want to go for lunch that I realize I've not really moved all day. And that movement, that lack of movement, means that I'm not really connecting to my body. I'm just seeing myself as this floating head on the screen. And this really affects our mind-body connection because our physiology affects our psychology. How we feel in our body affects how we feel in our minds, and that affects how we think. So I want to try another quick experiment with you guys. And as I said, I can't see you, so I really recommend you do this because you've nothing to lose. So I want to just try this quick experiment with you now to kind of prove this point. What I want you to do is I want you to slump in your seat a little bit. Just slump a little bit down. I want you to put your shoulders forward like this. I want you to, just put your chin down. I want you to kind of like cross your legs if you can, just like close off like this. I want you to think about how excited you are for the weekend. It's quite hard, actually, to be excited, to be open, to be interested and engaged when our whole bodies are closed off in this position. So now I want you to try something else. I want you to sit up. I want you to put your shoulders back. I want you to put your feet flat on the ground. I want you to put your chin up. I want you to take a big, deep breath, the biggest breath you've taken all day. And I want you to look up a little bit and I want you to think about how much you hate Donald Trump. And it's actually very difficult. It's really difficult to be filled with the appropriate level of venomous hatred when our bodies are open and when we're relaxed and we're engaged. And when we sit like this with our chin forward, the sides of our neck, these muscles on the side of our neck, the sternocleidomastoid muscle, I memorized that just for you guys. This muscle, which Darwin termed the muscle of curiosity, when we sit relaxed with this relaxed posture, our muscles in our neck are engaged and we're more curious. We're more interested in what people are saying. We're more present with each other and with ourselves. And it might be easier after a long day to just move to the sofa, to just slump down a little bit. But if you're in that slumped position, are you really focused? Are you really engaged? Are you really energized with what's happening on the screen, with the meeting, the 12th meeting you've had that day? Probably not. And this is so important as a leader, if you're leading a team. I just really want to encourage you, if you are going into a meeting, if you are leading a team, to first check in with yourself, connect with yourself. Think about what your body posture is like. If you're tired, if you're disengaged, if you're sat like this, is that really coming across as the right message that you're interested in other people and that they should be interested in you? Maybe not. So if you want to create more energy in a remote working meeting, make sure that you have energy for yourself first and you're connected with yourself. The final one is how it's affecting us emotionally. So it's so much harder to build empathy and connection over video. And I want to explain a little bit why. So a few decades ago, some Italian researchers were doing studies on monkeys. And I am not a scientist or a researcher, so I may be, simplifying this very difficult project, I'm sure, a little bit. But they discovered mirror neurons. And they discovered them by doing scans of monkeys. And they found that when monkeys were doing something, lifting a ball or eating, and when they were watching another monkey do the same action, lifting a ball or eating, the same part of the brain was firing in the same way. These mirror neurons light up in the brain, whether we're doing it or whether we're watching someone else do it. And this is what empathy is built on. If I see someone slip on the street or fall down, I feel that. I feel that embarrassment as if it was happening to me, even though it's not. But these mirror neurons, this empathy building part of the brain, it works best face to face. Videos are a shadowy substitute. It is genuinely harder to build empathy and connection with someone over a video call than it is when you're with them, when you can read their body language and you can really listen to them and they can feel like they're being heard. So my final check-in, and the easiest one by far, the one that if you do nothing else, I encourage you to do, is to do a check-in at the beginning of your meetings on a scale of 1 to 10. So all that is you ask people at the beginning of a meeting, the session, the one-to-one, whatever, the webinar even, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your energy level right now? And people can even type this in the chat. They don't have to say it out loud. They just need to think, check in with themselves and think, am I an 8? Am I a 2? See, I'm normally an 8. I don't know if you can tell. I'm normally quite an energetic person. But one day someone asked me on a scale of 1 to 10, what's my energy level? And I said, I'm a 2. I don't need to say anything else. Everyone in that meeting knows that maybe something's off. And I don't have to say, I slept really badly and I'm really worried about my dad and I'm finding this all really difficult and I can't concentrate. I don't have to say that. I just have to say that one number. But it allows people to have a quick glimpse of how I'm feeling, and it allows other people to be empathetic to how I'm feeling. And then maybe if you're the leader of that team, if you're the manager, you can check in with that person a little later in the day and you can ask them, how are you? And it's just an invitation to really make that connection a little bit more. So in summary, check in with one another. If you want to build more energy into your remote working sessions, if you want to build more connection, if you want to build more physicality, you need to make the effort, because connection takes consideration. We have to make explicit what was once implicit. We can't be in the same room anymore. We can't build rapport. So we have to find ways to kind of force it, to force that rapport in. And we need to find more ways to be playful. So check in with a playful, if you were an animal, what would you be? Check in and ask each other. We're all human and a lot of us are struggling, but we're not really going to know unless we ask. So I hope that that is something that you can take from today. And I hope you check in with one another. And I want you to really commit to do that. Commit to building more energy and connection into your day-to-day and doing this very simple thing in your next meeting. Thank you.
John, you're on mute.
Now then, there's always a technical problem. I was just saying to myself, thank you very much, Kat. That's very helpful and very good material, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions flowing from it. For everybody who's listening to this, please put your questions into the chat box, and we will be able to ask them of the speakers at the end. We'll move on now to Simeon Banks from Pure Technology Group, and I'll ask him to share his screen with us. Thank you very much, Simeon.
Thank you very much. And firstly, thank you very much for everybody attending this panel today. What I'm really here to talk to you about is how, and it harks back to really what Kat was saying about how we instill motivation within our teams within the Pure Technology Group, but how we do that primarily using technology. But I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail now. So Yeah, thank you once again, and I'm keeping it short, sharp, and injecting a little bit of humour in there as well. As many people know, that's how I tend to do presentations. So there we go. To start off with, now as mentioned before, I work for the PR Technology Group. We're a £40 million group of companies with 3 offices in the north of the UK. We are predominantly a sales and service organisation, so we have got large teams of people normally in the office, servicing many of yourselves that have probably joined the webinar. I know some people who are on the panel as well, with all the IT needs. Now, obviously, there's a new normal. I'm going to talk about this new normal a little bit more as the presentation goes on. My name is Simeon Banks, and I'm in charge of innovation for the PR Technology Group, predominantly focusing on providing customer advice on how to use the latest technologies. And what I'm going to talk about is Microsoft Teams and how we use that in a number of ways to keep our staff engaged. But to start off with, some stats to go along with that. Ever since this whole CV-19 situation started, the daily Teams use has grown to 44 million daily active users, which I'm sure we can all agree is absolutely monumental. These are big numbers, but it shows how nearly overnight a new technology can be adopted by a lot of people. These stats are to be taken with a pinch of salt because they were produced by a computer magazine, which I'm sure we can all agree isn't the most credible source of information in the world. But it does say that 12 million extra users per week have been added to the Teams platform as time goes on. Now, that stat in particular was only measured over one particular week at the peak of the whole CV-19 lockdown, but there we go. And I think more importantly for us as an organisation, we saw the world's first video call with a potato, and I'm sure we can all agree that's quite a technological advancement. And I'm sure there's some of you out there going, a call with a potato, how can that possibly be? Well, I do have evidence of that, and that is me on a video call not so long ago as a potato. And I think the key message behind this is, apart from making jokes about chips and all sorts of stuff like that, is in these strange new times that we live in, we've got to bring some humour into these situations just to keep everybody's morale up. And it's that sort of message behind the check-ins that Kat was saying earlier. Sometimes just making somebody smile can make a whole difference, and this is one way we've been doing it. But it doesn't just stop at silly things like making something potato or worm or whatever else as your camera. There is also other features as well with Microsoft Teams, which is virtual backgrounds, and many people use these where you see the blur the background so they can mask what's going on. We were talking before, just before you all joined this particular session, about there's one of the panelists done some electrical work done, and at least it isn't the famous part on the news where there was somebody in the shower behind them, and that's the reason why the whole blurred background thing came in to force, really. But that technology advanced a little bit where you can put your own backgrounds now, and some of our staff have been doing exactly that. But they've been getting a little bit more creative with it. For some of you there, you may have got the references in some of these backgrounds, some of you may not. But all I'm going to say is I'm sure Carol Baskin has something to do with it somewhere along the line. But it really is key to show again, it's that humour factor, that smile, that when you're having a day where you're feeling a 2, for example, it's being able to smile and go, what, that's just made my day as that. But not forgetting as well, sometimes anger and tempers can flare, because I call this my little 4-wall prison, and sometimes it does make me feel a little bit like the Hulk, and I do express that in many ways. As you can see there, it does come out every now and again, the green monster, but it does get stuff done, let me assure you. But I'm sure we can all agree, if the Hulk can't get it done, no one can. As I said before, this is meant to be light and humorous and just talk to you about how we go about things, and that really is the message. Meetings and all these webinars, whilst everything's going on, people are that blur between working and home life is, it's more apparent than ever now. This is the new normal. We've got to adapt to it the best way we can. And for us as a company, we tend to, especially our staff, tend to over communicate. Sometimes it has been said. We hold meetings and briefings and what's going on, celebrating that success, and communicating news to all of our members and staff, because we feel that's important. And we typically did that in big, large venue spaces once a quarter. We get everybody together and just talk about what's going on, very much Silicon Valley style, celebrating success and everything else. But obviously, naturally, at the moment, we can't get everybody together because of whatever is going on in the world. So we've had to adapt, and in the recent weeks, we produced our first virtual quarterly briefing. Now, this was done using Microsoft Teams with some back-end trickery, don't get me wrong, but this is how we delivered it, and it was a whole program behind it. You know, we put a lot of effort into making our staff still feel engaged. And whilst, you know, we can't get everybody together, you know, what we could do as a small token was we gave everybody an Uber Eats or Just Eat voucher so they could get themselves a takeaway in, so they could have something nice to eat whilst they were watching it. And we still had everybody together. It still felt like a family event, which is what we pride ourselves on. Granted, we can't wait to get everybody back together, but naturally we don't think that's going to be for a long time yet, because ultimately, again, I keep saying that we do believe this is the new normal. This is done through Microsoft Teams, so you know the functionality is there if you've got it, and you know we're using GoToWebinar now. It's all the same. It's just how you use it which makes the absolute difference. But talking about Microsoft Teams in particular, there's another part to it as well, which makes this particular format for us delivering news perhaps a bit more practical. We use something called Microsoft Stream. Now, Microsoft Stream is very much like an enterprise YouTube, if you will, but personal for your organization. So within Microsoft Teams, you can record webinars, and that's what we did for our virtual quarterly briefing. We recorded it for the people that couldn't make it because they were basically childcare or whatever else, and we've got to be flexible to that, and we recognise that, and we appreciate the efforts that everybody goes to everywhere. Anyway, so we recorded that. We upload it to Microsoft Stream, and it's there for people to watch back at their leisure. We're not forcing them to come out, you know, to a venue, to socialise. We're not making them do that as such. We're giving them the flexibility to do what they need to do. But Microsoft Stream isn't just there for us to, you know, put our quarterly briefings on there. It's a whole video platform, and so it's really useful for that. You know, going back to the check-in part that Kat was saying, when we want to check in with our staff and maybe just put a message out there to people, we can do it by Microsoft Stream on a video. So really a great example of this is our Chief Executive, Stephen O'Brien. Now, you can see by the sign, you know, in the background of this, he is very much forward-thinking, but he's also very straight to the point as well. So he's also very hands-on with his people. He likes to shake people's hands and make sure everybody's okay. And so not being able to be in the office and see everyone and, you know, really interact with everybody, you know, it's a struggle for all of us, but especially for him who likes, you know, likes to interact with people on the front line. And so for him, we came up with this program of where we get him to record a message on his laptop every week. And we post it on Microsoft Stream for everybody to watch at leisure. And it's very much a check-in, a motivational video, you know, whilst we're in it together. It's talking about what we're up to as a group of companies and what we're planning for in regards to, you know, the whole situation. Make sure we're showing we're doing all that we can. It's just all about that transparency, but also checking in as well. And that is the absolute key message there. You know, it's not just Stephen O'Brien that does this, it's everybody between all the departments record their own message to put out there to make it feel like that we are all together, we're all in this together, and that is the absolute key message. Beyond that, we also have a couple of different marketing efforts, but not marketing in the sense of marketing ourselves as a company, it's more marketing to the wider world that we're having the same challenges as everybody. So we launched a program called Quarantines on Instagram of all places, which is a feature where a lot of our members of staff join and post their stories, their day-to-day life on Instagram about how they're coping with lockdown. And there's no sales messaging behind it or anything like that. It's purely to show people who are there, you know, we're still working, but we're also in this boat together. It's that check-in thing again, checking with our customers, checking with our staff, and checking with the people out there in the World Wide Web about what we're doing. Now, to bring it back a little bit, you know, one of the things I'm sure a lot of people are missing at the moment is the pub and being able to socialise in groups together. And that's something as a company we did quite a lot of. We got everybody together, even if it was just for a drink, a bite to eat, something like that, and just chew the fat, talk about what's going on, and, you know, just catch up with everybody. And a lot of people are missing that. And I know I am, getting my follow-up prison. So it's a case of what can we do to, you know, resolve that. Now, I don't think we would have ever been able to fix it. Christ, there's a lot of people trying to fix it in the world at the minute, but we can try and bring some of that togetherness back. And we introduced a Friday virtual pub quiz. So we have a prize of the week for the quiz winner, but we use a platform called Crowdflow, and we've got we do it properly. We've got the platform that we broadcast through Microsoft Teams. We've got our quiz house, and one of our members of staff, Earthman, he wears a glittery jacket and all sorts of stuff. It's unbelievable. And we've also got an overall host in our marketing executive, JC, who takes part in that as well. And it's a whole team effort, but everybody joins, and it's such a big competition to be that winner. Whilst it is very competitive, it's also everybody in a team's call at the same time, just talking about the week, getting competitive, having that banter, if you will. It's such a good tool for people to check in with everybody else that they don't necessarily talk to day to day. I mean, we're 130 members of staff now as a group. Sometimes we do have members of staff that don't speak to each other for weeks because the departments just don't work together that much. So having everybody into that one team's call sometimes does make a lot of difference. But enough about us and what we're doing for ourselves. It's more about now what we've been doing for some of our customer-facing events and what we're doing for you guys out there, if you will. Back in January this year, we launched our first our series of events, which, as you can imagine now, that series that we had planned for 2020 has taken somewhat of a different turn. And that kicked off really with our esports event. And this was an innovative event for us. Again, not sales it in the slightest. It was more about getting like-minded people from the IT industry together in a room, playing games, having a drink, a bit of food, and just having a good time. After this particular night, it was such a round success for us, just from the conversation engagement to catch up with everybody, we decided immediately to hold another one on the 20th of May. Now, since then, the world has changed and there is this new normal that I keep talking about. And so we've had to adapt. And we've adapted that to an online-only event where we're getting everybody from around the UK and some in Europe, in fact, to join a gaming league online with a prize at the end of it. And that's as simple as it gets. And yes, we do get sponsored to cover the cost, but it's not sales. It's more take some time out of your day, get away from doing your work, and just enjoy a bit of socializing with different IT professionals. It's that checking in, but not with people that you know, other people as well that you may not know. And it's more keeping that spirit alive, if you will. But don't just stop at, novel events such as the esports one either. This is happening on the 20th of May, and all the details are there, so please sign up if you do want to. We've also got what we're calling Workshop Wednesday, which is we've got IT professionals around the table and talked about popular topics, and one of them was Microsoft Teams. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, again, this isn't exactly possible at the moment either, but doing exactly like we're doing now, we've adapted this to purely an online event as well, as you can see there. And that is the absolute key message. It's that adapting what we're doing and making the best of the situation. And that's all we can do, is make the best of it and use the tools at our disposal, such as Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Stream and all the other Microsoft products to deliver that. And that's the absolute key message. What I'm trying to get across is, whilst we are in this new normal, this new way of working, that probably won't change for a long time, and I don't think we'll ever go back to the way that we used to know as normal. Whatever we used to do in the physical, with the right tools, knowledge, software support, and everything else around it, and they're willing to do so, you can adapt what you were doing in the physical to the virtual world. And really, that leads me on to one of the last points, really, which is the security behind that. Because all these new platforms are great and everything, but it's about what you do with them afterwards. And when this first started, happening in March, everybody in the UK and Europe were trying to buy endpoint devices. A lot of you on this call now will remember trying to get hold of stock, and it still is that way. Trying to get hold of stock of PCs, laptops, webcams, microphones, and all the rest of it has just been, now impossible. And when it does land, it does get diverted somewhere else, and it's been a real struggle. But for as long as I've been working for the Pure Technology Group, I've never seen a situation where we've seen that much hardware being shipped for endpoints. And that's a testament to IT departments being able to provision that quickly, which is great. But it doesn't stop the security risk with that. There's still network vulnerabilities, but it's now in the home. Untrusted devices, data access, encryption in transit, data loss prevention, or device management, no multi-factor authentication. There's a lot of things still to be done, and we can help with. Risk number one really there is ransomware. It's well reported that since CV19 has kicked off, the amount of ransomware attacks has increased dramatically because people have lowered their guards because of everything that's going on, because it's been that quick to work from home. Again, with phishing as well, phishing attacks, email-related phishing attacks relating to CV19, and click here to, get your face masks or whatever else, they're on the rise as well. But what this all leads to is, inevitably at some point, someone's going to click on it, it's going to be inadvertent, or in fact a malicious data breach, which nobody can really afford. And again, Microsoft has tools to help prevent that, which if you do want more information, please feel free to get my contact details after this. But the one thing I do want to stress is all of the above can be mitigated. Will be to do that. In some cases, that's at no cost or minimal subscription. It doesn't have to cost anything. It's just a case of knowing what you need to do. And I think I've run a little bit quickly, but for me, that is the end of my little talk for now. There is going to be a Q&A at the end of it, which please save your questions for that. But thank you very much for your time listening to me. Very weird is this new normal because you can't look at people in their eyes and see what they think. So hopefully you found it interesting. I look forward to taking some questions at the end. And with that, I'd like to hand back to John.
Thank you very much, Simeon. There's some fantastic material there, and we've already got questions coming through, so we'll share those a little bit later on. Can I now introduce Laura Lancaster, who's Head of Agile Delivery at the Manchester Airport Group. Laura, I'll hand over the screen share to you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I presume you can see my presentation now. So, hello everyone. As John said, I'm Laura Lancaster and I'm the Head of Delivery at it's Mago. So we are the digital side of Manchester Airport Group. The business is pretty split, and our attitude towards the working from home is quite different. I think if we go 2020 BC, I'm calling it, before COVID, back in the day when the most exciting part of the day wasn't managing to get an Asda shop slot for in 3 weeks' time, the good old days. We've always had remote teams working in the product tech and the Mago side, so we're across 6 locations anyway, and working from home up to 2 days a week is just normal for the teams, and our ways of working has always been optimized for the way that dispersed teams work. So it was nothing new to us to be able to move to a working from home model. It's quite different to the corporate side of Manchester Airport Group. I was involved in a lot of the commands, so silver command and bronze command, when we were working towards looking from being office based to being working from home based, and there was a lot of nervousness around the corporate side of the business because it was completely alien to them to be able to understand that people could work remotely and still do everything that they did before. And I think that if you haven't got a team that you can trust to go and work remotely, then you've definitely got the wrong team. The ways of working that we had previously, the guy with the beer, I think, is how the corporate side thought our working from home worked, where work definitely comes in air quotes. But the way that we worked within the Mago group is we make sure that we do quarterly vision, so we know exactly what we want to achieve in a quarter. That's then broken down into what we want to do in a week by weekly goals. And then the teams will get together and have daily stand-up, so each person is accountable for what they're doing. Everyone knows what they need to do, and they just like to have the freedom to just crack on and do the work in their own time and making sure that they're delivering what they need to do for the team. We have feedback on that, so there's fortnightly retros where if there's anything that's come up that isn't quite working, it's optimized and changed. And these are all things that we were doing before COVID, before everyone was working from home, that helped us to be able to work remotely and in dispersed teams. We're not working from home, we're working at home in a crisis. So it's not the normal, I would work from home on a Friday, I'd drop the kids off at school and then I'd get a really good shift on with anything that meant that I could just get my head down, get work done with no interruptions and no meetings. That's not the situation that we're in at the moment. We're all working, trying to do our best, but it's in a crisis situation. And that means, for me, for the teams, what's really important for everyone now is just checking in and making sure that everyone's okay. I know that if anyone is like me, my life is an emotional roller coaster, and we call it midweek meltdown on our management meeting on a Wednesday morning, because by Wednesday usually something's happened to derail our week and putting us on the emotional down roller coaster. So what's really important, I've been doing with all of my teams and everybody across Mago, is making sure that the line manager support is there for the people that are working for me, and then they're also their direct reports. So we've been having, making sure we have one-to-ones. Everyone's got one-to-ones at least once a week, but more often if it's needed. I think, like Kat was saying around, you know, if you notice somebody's score would be down, if you notice on a meeting they're particularly low, we are just checking in and making sure everyone's okay, and being really understanding to everyone's circumstances. So I know that there's people on my teams that are trying to work from home. The partner's also trying to work from home. They've got young children at home. Maybe they're trying to school the children at the same time. And, you know, they were getting to the point where they're just like at breaking point with what they're doing. In these cases, you know, people are saying, you know, shall I book holidays? Shall I do this? And we've managed to work their working day around what best suits their new normal. And you know, that might mean for some people that they have all their meetings and do all of their work in the morning, hand over to their partner and do some childcare in the afternoon and log back on in the evening. We're doing whatever works for the people that are working with us to make sure that they're not struggling, because it's really important, because you know, it can be really, really lonely when you're sat in your four-wall prison, Simeon, each day, and just checking in on people. Some people that are working in the teams are living on their own, living in a flat on their own, and you just think, you know, considering every single person's circumstances and knowing that at some point everyone's going to be struggling, and just being there to make sure that you're trying to give them solutions and not just giving them more work and expecting everyone to just crack on as normal. Communication has been really important. I think that one of the things that we really struggled with our ways of working pre-COVID, and this is one really good thing that's come out of it, and Simeon spoke about it quite a bit, is Microsoft Teams. Before we came to being on lockdown, we sporadically used it across the group, but nobody used it consistently, and it wasn't used in the best way. And a lot of the video conferencing we would do on Skype for Business, which would not work for us all the time, especially when you've got one location with a lot of people in and then people working remotely. It just didn't work. Teams, everyone being at home, all of the communication has worked seamlessly. All the one-to-ones, we have a check-in twice a week with everyone in the company, including the CEO, Andrew Harrison. He runs it for us, takes questions from everybody. So every single day at some point you'll be using Teams to catch up with different groups that you're involved with. So we have leadership meetings every morning to make sure everyone's okay from a leadership perspective, and then that filters on through all of the teams. We'll have their stand-ups and then 2 wash-ups a week with the whole company. And we're really making sure that everyone's got the focus that they need. So having really clear roadmaps and tasks that people can just get on with and not feel like they're blocked and waiting for somebody to give them some work, so everyone can be autonomous and just work and know that they're working towards the right focus. So what's gone well? This is from a Mago perspective. I think we seamlessly transitioned. The Thursday, we told everybody that we were going to be working from home from the Friday, and the Friday everyone picked up as normal and just carried on with their work. We'd done a couple of communication tests in that week running up to make sure that we used a WhatsApp group to disseminate information, starting from leadership with your line management groups, to make sure that if people didn't have access to emails or anything like that, we could get one message to everybody almost instantly and we could have the read notifications to make sure that everyone had seen what you needed them to see, and if not, we would call them up. The tech has worked perfectly. I think that even all of the naysayers that just wanted to stay on Slack and didn't want to move to using Microsoft Teams, are really pleased, and it's been a real positive that's come out of it. The team spirit and the attitude to everybody has just blown me away. I think sometimes you'd expect to go on and, don't get me wrong, there is a degree of moaning about things, but that's just life. But the way that everyone's just got on, carried on with their work, it has literally blown me away. And as Simeon talked about, the virtual culture building has been amazing. I mean, I am quizzed out, I'm not going to lie. I've came bottom of my family quiz for about 3 weeks in a row. And yeah, so last time it was on, I was busy. I didn't join in because I didn't want the wooden spoon. Pass that on to somebody else for a change. Last week we virtually went to Chester races. So everyone dressed up. And some into fancy dress. So there was some inflatable horses around, some just into their racing suits. We had races from last year's Chester races, people commentating on it. You could make bets. It was really fun. And we used that was via the medium of Google Sheets for all of our bets to go into, which we load tested that to the max. I think there was about 65-70 people trying to put their bets in at the same time, and it did crack a few times. So any recommendations on something else we could use for that racing, please send them over or add them in the questions. We've had wine and cheese nights, gaming nights. There's been loads of things that people have just been being brought together and virtually keeping in touch. It hasn't gone without its challenges. It's really difficult when you live in a world where normally you could just go and ask somebody a question and have a small conversation, a water cooler conversation, or just at somebody's desk. Everything is now a meeting, and the developers on the teams are crying out there is too many meetings. And you can see it because when you see in people's diaries, their mornings are just back to back, and it's really difficult to get the headspace when you sat in a meeting from the first thing in the morning when you've got up until the evening when you're finishing work. I know that when we first started out on our working from home, some of the guys were doing 12-hour days, just trying to get everything in a place where the teams had the focus and the weekly goals to be able to follow. So the meetings has been an issue. One of the things that we've been looking at, and again Simeon spoke about this, we've been recording some of the things where it was just an info give. So we wanted to make sure everyone was informed on something. They'll be recorded and then people can watch them at their own leisure instead of putting lots and lots of slots in people's diaries. On the flip side of too many meetings, if you don't have all of the meetings, there's things where there's been siloed information. So conversations have happened in one space that's not managed to get to every single person. And then people feel like they're out the loop, or some of the dependencies aren't being managed as well as they could. We're just monitoring this and just carrying on, trying to pass information on as much as we can without trying to get everybody in every single meeting. And it's a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge. I can't see that one going away. The way that we've worked now has highlighted weaknesses in people, because I guess when you're working as part of a team and you can ask questions of your peers, when that's done in a virtual way, it really shows when people can't think for themselves or have got weakness in certain areas. So that's really shone a light on things like that, where it's been quite a surprise, because you've thought people were really strong in certain areas, and it's transpired, it's been more of a group effort that's brought that together. But it's good because it highlights areas of development of things that maybe would have gone under the radar before. I know I suffer with difficulty in focusing for long periods on VC meetings. I think that my attention span is probably 45 minutes for one. If you sat in one meeting with one topic, 45 minutes, and I'm probably not listening anymore or not taking in all of the information that I need. So we've looked at doing things in more of a bite-sized way, because we would have 2-3 hour workshops. I've been on some Microsoft Teams calls that have been in excess of 3 hours, doing things in more of a bite-sized way. So changing our new normal. So something that would have been a 3 hour workshop is split up across the week or across 2 weeks, to make sure that everyone takes in the information that they need, because again, going back to the siloed information piece, a lot of that could be because people just have not captured exactly what they needed to take from the meeting because it's gone on for too long. The other challenge that we had in working in aviation, the strategy that what we were going to do for the next quarter, everything that we had planned out, needed to be pivoted on, and everyone in the business needs to be involved in that, and we needed to do that remotely. So it was really difficult, and I guess that was one of the drivers for all of the 3-hour meetings. It's just trying to pull all of that together. So the Q1 plan for us was a difficult one to bring together, but we're looking at the Q2 one now, and it's going a lot smoother because we've got more time to try and pull this together, and we're sort of a little bit in the swing of things with our remote ways of working. So that's the challenge that we've had. I'm sure there's going to be many more to come. But what does the future look like? How do I think this is going to change our ways of working? I'm hoping that from the corporate side, the working bit loses its air quotes, because everyone is working really hard. I think probably you'll look at all of your teams and know that there's nobody at home skiving, watching Homes Under the Hammer. People want to be productive and want to get the work done. So I'm hoping that the corporate side of all businesses understand that and start to trust their employees to just get on with what they need to do. The other positive thing that I think will come out of this is, with the working from home working successfully, the talent pool for recruitment will be extended, because people could have fully remote teams, and that will work really well because we've got the technology and the ways of working to support it. So that's what I think the two positive things that could come out of all of our pain that we've gone through for the past few weeks and months. That's a Mago lens on our experience of mass working from home in a crisis so far. If you've got any questions on this, feel free to add them at the end, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Laura. There's some fascinating material there, and we're getting some good questions through already. We'll address those at the end. Our next speaker is Shemek Kozka, who's the head of IT at Diversity Travel. He's got some case studies for us as well. If I can introduce Shemek and share the screen with him. Thank you, Shemek.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Good afternoon, everyone. So my presentation will take a slightly different, probably slightly different perspective on the home working. So we as a business looked at home working before and how we actually actively support home working or remote working to help us as a business. I think since the C-19 happened, we as a business were forced to do it, and kind of I was the main instigator of this, and I would like to go over a case that we analyzed in our business. It's more related to cost and some benefits and challenges that I'm yet still to resolve with some of my board members or kind of in our business, but also managers and their managers and actually line staff, because I think that to be successful and actually have a proper home working, it all boils down to culture, things that have been mentioned, the meetings, the email, how we utilize things, and so on and so on. So just a few words about myself. I've been in IT over 15 years, mainly in travel sector, so service related, but a bit of a digital marketing and some telecommunications as well. I manage a team of around 30 people currently in a medium-sized business. As a business, we have 185 staff in the UK, Europe, and in the US. I've went through a lot of different IT areas, started as a support technician, systems administration, network administration, some databases in between development, and then was lucky enough to be kind of coached and mentored into be assistant head of IT. then head of IT, and now currently director of technology. So just very quickly, a recap of things that we've looked into in terms of advantages and disadvantages of remote working. And I'm personally in diversity, I'm faced with a bit of a resistance from other directors, some managers, team managers, and staff to actually work from home. But if you have a look, they might not be a binary comparison, apples for apples, but there clearly is much more advantages to think actively about. We need to be, at least to some degree, orientated towards remote flexible working. For employees, it adds time. No one is paying for your commute. Not only it saves you the cost, it gives you some, flexibility rather than having a 3 breaks of 20 minutes and standing by the water cooler. You may say, actually, I'm going to take an hour and go to see the doctors or something like that. For so many cases, it helps with motivation and general kind of the overall better well-being and work-life balance. It really will depend on individuals' kind of situation, the living situation there. But in most cases, this has been proven in many papers, research, CIPD. There is a report, 60 pages of remote working approach and how it changes. And it changes. We either will unwillingly follow that path, or we will make sure that we get greater benefits. There are clearly some benefits to the employers, and from my perspective, obviously the morale, the absenteeism, the turnover. It is a benefit. Not all businesses, or not jobs, or not all professions allow that. And us being in the service, and I particularly working in IT, almost all my interviews and the guys I hired, it is almost a basic question after the offer: what type of flexibility do you offer? And with competition, at least in Manchester, if I tell them there is none, they basically will pick some other business that offers that. I think the life balance and how we approach to work is changing, especially in the younger generation. Increased talent pool has been mentioned. Office space cost saving, and I will use this as an example, the calculation we've done for our particular case. Environmental impact for these who are green or have ISO and client commitment. So we service charity and academic sector, and some of our greener charities require us to provide our CO2 emissions, and in order for us to get a contract with them, we actually have to have an annual review and things that we've improved. So this is a case that we can easily show. And again, I think this is important from overall business perspective. These will decrease the costs of running the business. Unfortunately, they're very, very difficult to quantify. There are some disadvantages. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think they all boil down to culture. I'll mention that in a minute. Here's just diversity outlook, and in terms of the unwilling or just by accident how the home working happened. So when I joined the business in 2014, we had less than 15 home workers. And when we looked into the infrastructure, and at the time I had to speak to kind of individual board members at the time who was a different squad, and the answer was no, we don't like home working. There won't be any home workers, but we already had a few. With that in mind, we still prepared as a part of a disaster recovery business continuity scheme to say we will have more home workers, no matter if we as a business want it. You always will find that particular great candidate, be that in IT or in customer services, that you will want to hire. And with competition in Manchester, turned out to be true. And this is the kind of the path until 2019. And projection, what will happen, we want it or not, that probably is the path we're going to be on. Again, this is a medium-sized business. It probably works differently in different industries in your organizations. So in 2019, we suddenly realized that we are running off the office space, and actually this is not an office space. Fire safety regulations say that we cannot have more people on our floor, despite still having some of empty desks. So a massive debate erupted in terms of, let's look for the new office space. Let's look for an additional office space in the current building. We are in central Manchester, Portland Street, and look at the costs and what we should do and so on and so on. And kind of my first reaction was, hold on, but why are we even considering this? It will be more expensive than looking at sending additional amount of people to work from home. And here's the kind of analysis of, you know, sending additional, in our case, maybe 30 people to work from home, and some kind of budgetary costs. And these are the costs kind of that you would see over kind of the DCO for 3 years. Apologies, is not updated. But what we calculated is that we can save over 100 grand versus actually acquiring 25% more office space. And this will give us all the, you know, additional benefits, savings, gains, however you want to call them. But there might be some additional costs. However, they are also benefits for staff. We can increase social budget for parties and things like that, the gatherings where you actually want to meet people after work. There will be some additional travel costs for some, let's say, in-house training that you have to be inside for whatever reason, airline meetings and things like that. There will be some additional training to actually get people out of the headspace. If someone is at home, they do not work, and you know that requires some additional costs and some monitoring tools. And kind of that slide was taken with a bit of a pinch of salt, a series of questions about, you know, how are we going to overcome these challenges that we have. And here's just some that you probably face. You know, how do you run induction trainings? How do you do one-to-ones? Any other meetings, projects and updates? I'm a kind of firm believer that if your meeting is longer than half an hour, it's already a red flag. Also, if you cannot specify kind of your thoughts in an email, don't even schedule the meeting. If you don't know what the meeting is about, just don't email it out. That's at least what my team does. Anything without the agenda is auto-rejected straight away. And this is across, I defend my team, any other manager. If they send an email to one of my guys without the agenda, just decline. I'll deal with that later. Because the meetings, and now with the let's easily get 3 people into a Teams meeting or GoToMeeting type of situation, it drains time and resources and the mental capability. So I think the whole meeting thing has to be rethought in general. Again, a lot of article books, Harvard Business Review, press, a lot of research done that, you know, meetings in most cases, you should be thinking about how you run things, and the meetings should be the kind of the last resort or the introductory social element. Technology and specific tools that we have or don't have were challenged. Management capability, I think that kind of to allow and make sure people effectively work from home comes from the culture and ability of your people in the business to pull it off. And it will require things like rethinking individual jobs description and tasks that you might have to complete within that job. We think that, you know, let's say a rail agent, one of their tasks is to print physical tickets. They need to pack them and send to a client. That should no longer be part of their job. If that's the only bit they are required for in the office, but we can save X amount of money and make their life easier and better by making them or allowing them to work from home, is to say, rail agents no longer do that. We have admin staff who always will be in the office. They have to do the post. I think it's going back to and rethinking, you know, our current situation and readjusting consciously into what is the working from home type of situation, and is it going to benefit us? In kind of our case, we've done the ROI, and you know there are monetary gains, and there will be more, you know, less sickness and so on and so on. There's plenty of stats. So, you know, think about the communication, how you schedule. Why do you need the meetings? You know, why so many? Obviously, with C19 now, we don't have an option to go to the office and to meet for the meetings that have to happen face to face. But it also is the retraining situations where, you know, we had some people working from home and then some people coming into a small meeting room in the office to make a meeting together. Again, that has, you know, we said that needs to stop. If you do a go-to-meeting, everyone in the office stays at their desk. Otherwise, you know, the communication, the equipment, the people in the office talk about one thing, the people on the chat are doing some other things. So it's one way or the other for us. Obviously, training and utilization of things like GoToMeetings and Teams, and you know, I'm kind of laughing, but as an IT person, it's something that takes months to retrain and make sure people adopt new ways of working. I've managed to utilize C19 and the fact that people have to work from home to actually roll out 3 or 4 different tools, Teams being one of them, our soft phone solution and the other bits, because people were then, I'm not saying desperate, but they had to learn it. And you know, it also is a flag for the business to say, well, if you really have to, you adopted these things. Why some other projects that will clearly bring benefit are taking so much time to roll out? I think, you know, the situation, do we provide equipment, what level of equipment we provide is important. You know, obviously there are some legal elements and HRM elements that we had to take into account, and all businesses that will think about remote working will have to take into consideration, is it a bring your own device or not? But you know, we need to allocate additional budget to make these things happen. I think, you know, it's not just going to happen free of charge, but I think there are long-term benefits that will pay for it, maybe not this month, but 6, 12, 2 years down the line. The kind of the key bit here is the company culture and investment in staff. And as I said, I'm in diversity, we're not there yet. We're still a business that is resistant to the fact that we will be hiring remotely. It's not so much in IT, I think it's more acceptable, but we do have home workers scattered around Europe, Ireland, US. But our mentality is still, we look for someone to work in Manchester. I think that mentality, there has to be a kind of a leadership and say every role, anyone in the UK, that's the default. Yes, if they work in Manchester and they can sometimes come into the office, that's a plus. Otherwise, just look everywhere. There are fantastic people that can do a great job, and it will open up your talent pool and shorten the time to get people on the floor. And also redefine the roles. It will be a, you know, probably a 2-year debate about some of the roles that we currently have in the business and how they should change. And some of the tasks should basically no longer be on a certain role responsibility list. They should be somewhere else. I think, you know, to prepare business for efficient home working is just not to take what we have and just lift it and squeeze it in. Well, this is going to fit in someone's small office like I have, or, you know, and twice a week they'll come into the office. I think it needs a strategic and deep review of actually from the beginning, it's our service and the roles and the systems and whatever, are they aligned and prepared to kind of to deliver that? So that company culture, and for those of you who are in managerial or, you know, kind of owners or leadership position, I would urge you to have these discussions with your staff. It sometimes means that, you know, I, for example, have to challenge my peers and say, you know, I know you don't like it, but there are clearly figures and stats. It will work. You know, how can we make it so you know, how we can test this for you or show that this is going to be beneficial for everyone. And then we've done a bit of a simulation. If we were, you know, we were successful in doing this, this is the jump that we could make. We could basically send, well, additional 42 people, 52 people in this case, to work from home. And this means that, you know, we can think about rearranging our office to make it more Google-like, make a nice sofa space rather than just bank of desks. That people who are in the office, they can come in and also relax and make it much better environment. I will completely skip all the things about business continuity and resilience that most IT people will worry about. It will help there. But from overall kind of a business perspective, I think it's a lot of us and a lot of friends I'm talking to, they do it because it happens rather than consciously going in and saying, we will have a home working or remote working strategy. We will realign the business. We will prepare the budget. We will do ROI. and we'll evaluate how to roll it out in a much better way. So that's it from me. Feel free to ask any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Shemek. Thank you very much for that. We're getting the questions in, but we'll save them for the end. In the meantime, can I introduce Robert Van Tol, who is a colleague of Kat Murray's from Spark. And Robert is going to talk to us about the more psychological aspect, amongst other things, of working remotely. Thank you, Robert. I'll share your.
Thank you very much, John. Hopefully, yes, you can see my screen. Yes, I'm a colleague of Kat's, but as well as a digital consultant and UX expert, I'm also a psychotherapist. And it's really from that point of view that I want to address you today. This talk came from one of our own delivery managers who was concerned that although our team was smashing delivery and coming up to fulfillment of MVP, there was a definite sag at around about week 4 in people's energy, and she wondered what was going on. So I approached it as I would as a therapist with a new client coming and presenting a problem to me, and using just straightforward, simple techniques from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and transactional analysis. And in those approaches, we would usually do 3 things, one of which is we would try and surface everything that's going on for people, accounting in the jargon, and to make sure that the story that they told us was the full 360 view rather than the thing that was most at front of mind. And then we'd look and review at the different ways they were coping with those stresses that they'd accounted for, and see which were helpful and see which were potentially unhelpful, but not in a shaming way. You know, this is an unusual situation. Just because I'm personally snacking too much isn't something I'm going to beat myself over the head with. And then get them to have a conversation around that with themselves or the team or their partners. And that's the kind of process I'm going to take you through now on this mind map, which is large and complicated and it's full of stuff. I think I'll start over here. One of the things that's we're all aware of, but possibly can't name, is that before all this started, there was a very clear definition and boundary between work and home, and between me as a professional and me as a family man and me as a partner. And that's all got jumbled up. Our ability to control me time and we time is suffering. I mean, I never thought I would actually personally miss commutes, but commutes turned out to be one of the few times when I was, you know, on my own, just free spinning my mind and listening to whatever I wanted to and ditting on my phone and what have you. And instead of that, I have a sense in which I'm always on. You know, I'm at work and then a couple of steps through the door behind me and I'm at home. And there's no downtime. I'm always around. I'm always a partner, a father, a worker, a something or other. And it's compromised the sort of clear definitions you had in terms of time between work time and what we laughingly called lunchtime and family time and me time. And it's all got a little bit jumbled up. When my 9-year-old comes in and wants to discuss something really important to him, which tends to be sort of Super Mario, Doctor Who, Minecraft, you know, I have to stop what I'm doing and I have to really listen to it in a ways that is unexpected before all of this started. So that's going on. And then obviously there's this monumental global stress that we're all under going on. Now, we're a culture of mustn't grumble, keep calm, carry on. And we don't like to make a huge song and dance about all of this, but behind each and all of us is this open-ended uncertainty. You know, when will it end? The Chancellor yesterday extended the furlough scheme through to October. You know, this is not going to be a particularly short-term thing. And we've all, or many of us, have entered into this as if it were a temporary thing. We've all just, you know, battened down the hatches and done our best, which is great. We're really, really good at that. But it leaves unprocessed some of the things that are going on behind. We might get ill. I might get ill. You know, I'm 60 years old, I'm a male, courtesy of my fridge, I'm now several pounds over my 25 BMI. Those are all negative predictors. I don't want to get ill. That would be a bad thing. And leaving that aside, even if I don't think about that, death is in the news constantly, all the time. One of the best books on death, it's a sentence you can only do if you've been a therapist, it's called Staring at the Sun. And it's called Staring at the Sun because you just can't do it for too long. The sun obviously will burn your eyes, and if you think about death for too long, it just promotes nihilism and what's the point and slopey shoulderedness, and is unhelpful. And even if all of that wasn't true, then just the trivial and most mundane things are either not possible or just take a huge amount of time and effort. And they multiply that background stress into a whole raft of home stresses. So others have talked about the diverse situations. So you as managers have to cope with staff. Some of them live alone, some of them live in shared flats and houses, some are just couples, some have young families, middle families, sort of 10-ish, older children, elder relatives. They all have different flavors of what's going on. There's a financial stress and job security around this. My own partner's lovely handcrafted furniture business has gone into liquidation. I've been supporting her in finding new opportunities, which she's lucky enough to come along. But I mean, that's taken weeks of ups and downs and soap opera drama around all of that. BGSS, and I imagine yourselves in technology, are very fortunate to be well positioned to take advantage of this new thing. But partner stresses include if your partner's a key worker and has to go out and has to expose themselves more. Even if not, even if your partner is just someone who's around a lot. The Open University calculated that normally we'd be during the week around each other for 2.5 hours, and now we're around each other for 15 hours. That's not necessarily problematic, but what often can happen is we just fall into ways of being and patterns, perhaps just taking how we are on the weekend or something and just assuming that will fit in. And what we often don't do is just sit down and talk about it a little bit. How do we do this? Why am I sat in the study, which is north facing, often quite cold, and my lovely partner's in the conservatory, which is lovely and sunny and warm? I don't know, we just started doing that. And how we share the resources, how we share the child care. What's going on about our loved ones? My son hasn't seen his lovely grandparents 2 villages away, which is a constant stress, and they've been isolating, they're in their 70s and keeping safe. So there's all of that going on. Plus, for many of us as pretty high achievers, we are slightly prone to put ourselves under self-stress. Stress to carry on and keep calm. Stress to, oh, I'm working from home. I must maximize myself. I must do that thing, that self-improvement thing that I've always promised myself and never get around to. It's said in a context which is that work is also a background stress. BGSS, we work in an agile way, and agile is a brilliant methodology for collaboration, for working closely together, for sharing the Sharpie on the whiteboard and discussing things all around each other, which of course is the antithesis of where we are now, and makes it difficult to build rapport and onboard people, or indeed just decision making. And we've had to be a bit creative, and you've heard some nice ideas this afternoon about how to deal with some of that overhead. And the trouble with many of these stresses that are going on is they leave us in what's been rather nicely called a social recession. So we're all familiar with an economic recession when the level of economic activity has gone down. In this, the level of social interaction has, well, plummeted. And with that has been a decline in what therapists call the stroke economy, which is how you are recognized and given attention, and how our hunger for relationship is fed as social animals. So we lack positive strokes. Who knew that going to the office would be such a rich experience in terms of psychological acknowledgement that you matter? Just me going into the office and people saying, "Hey Rob, how are you?" and smiling and having a chat around the coffee machine and tapping my elbow and asking me some question that I can help with is all a rich weaving of being needed and being important in other people's lives. And if we don't get that, there is a tendency where we fill the void with imagined negative strokes. When my lovely delivery manager asked me to have a look at this the first time round, she just slapped me and said, "Oh, Rob, can I have a quick chat with you?" And I immediately went to being a small boy sitting outside the headmaster's study, wondering what I'd done wrong. And I had to give myself a little bit of a talking to say, "No, she's lovely with me. We've really a great relationship. I haven't done anything wrong. Calm down." And if we lack strokes, if we lack people telling us that what we do matters, then it's very easy to move to a position where it doesn't really matter. If no one else seems to be caring, it probably, doesn't matter that much. What's the point? We hunger. In therapy, we talk about 6 hungers for people in relationships. The first one is structure. How is your time organized and planned out in the day so that you can move from one thing to another thing to another thing in a way that feels satisfying? One of the things that prisoners find difficult when they go in is the normal structure of their day disappears, and then difficult when they leave prison in that they have been imprinted with such a strong structure that they find it difficult to create their own. Associated with the time structuring is incident, the highs and the lows, the spontaneity. This world is almost completely lacking in spontaneity. I think I've had 3 spontaneous conversations with people since I've gone down into lockdown, ignoring the chats with my partner and son. And with that comes a hunger for stimulus, for all of our senses to be satisfied. If every day is like every other day, it can be really, really hard to notice the highs and lows and to enjoy and get a sense of joie de vivre out of everything. It all just becomes a little bit flat and tasteless. Recognition hunger, I've alluded to with the positive strokes, to be seen and to feel that you matter. And contact hunger is to feel that you are touched by people, emotionally touched by people. They share something with you at work, a little bit of their private life that they're having difficulty with. You're able to help, they're grateful, you're delighted. You've shared a lovely empathetic emotional exchange between each other. And then finally, obviously one that you can't help with as managers, sex hunger, which is less about swigging from the chandeliers and more about just feeling erotically fancied and sought after. And you'd have thought, well, I'm with my partner all day long, sure that's not a problem. But actually, absence really does make the heart go fonder, and it's really, really hard to miss someone when they're around all the time, and easy to take for granted. So from all this, this rich complexity of stuff going around with your home, with your life, with your work, and with your emotional stuff, there is, oh yes, this is what I was going to do. There is a tendency for us to potentially start to feel mentally poorly. I use poorly because the English language is a bit poor with words to describe low levels of mental illness. Physical illness, you can be under the weather or not quite yourself or poorly or whatever, but mental illness sounds like a big thing, as if you should have capital letters, and I'm not talking about that. But the kind of mental poorly that you might come from lack of intimacy, and lack of intimacy, a lot of lack of emotional contact, a lack of these hungers not being fulfilled is a major cause for mental illness. You're likely to go down one of the routes that you're personally most prone to. So some of you Or some of your teams may be prone to some of the social issues, the social phobias. They may fade away, their friendships may decrease, their shyness might balloon. They may have a fantasy that if no one's really missing them, then it doesn't really matter if I'm around at all, and they may just fade to grey. For people prone to anxiety issues, it can either transmit itself in an internalized form, which is tension and restlessness and pessimism and nervousness, or in its externalized form as anger. Both are the same. Anxiety is having a lot of emotional energy and not being able to do very much about it. Anger is a way of taking that energy and throwing it outside and giving it to other people, either through explosive anger, the classic mad, shouty anger that we usually associate with anger, but even just as much with implosive anger, the kind of sulking, being in a mood, making everybody tiptoe around you kind of anger, or just the cutting people dead and just flouncing off and departing kind of attitudes. Most common, everyone's favorite, is some of the depressive issues, which could exhibit itself as just classic low mood. There's a lot around that. Persistent low mood is the #1 defining characteristic of depression, and it's because of the flatness of light, because of the lack of stimulus hungers and structure hungers and recognition hungers going through, it's been easy to fall into that kind of thing. Personally, I'm prone to ennui, to lacklusterness, to everything just being a bit grey and not knowing quite what to do with myself. And then finally, there will be people who wall off their mental life, but and are often sort of strong people, I'm fine, but then exhibit physical illnesses. Somatization is the surprisingly hard word to say in a presentation. So it could be muscle aches and pains, headaches, indigestion, kind of chronic low-grade illnesses that you get, or illnesses from lack of taking care of yourself. My first week of lockdown here, I gave myself a back sprain by just ignoring all of the ergonomic rules of office organization that I know perfectly well. I know how to sit straight at a desk and do all of that, but I managed to ignore it all. So with all that around, there are luckily a great many coping mechanisms to deal with this. Some are helpful, some are unhelpful, but that doesn't mean you should tut at them. You might want to forgive them. Some are helpful ways of changing your work, which I'll deal with less today because other people have addressed that. Let's have a look at some of the unhelpful ways. I've characterized two. One is kind of going into student mode, for those of us who can remember that far back, where your routine is chaotic, you know, getting up at lunchtime kind of thing. Chaotic boundaries, so kind of mixing up mates and work and ignoring responsibilities. You're kind of driven by what do I want to do next, as if life was a series of donuts with Homer Simpson chasing after each individual one. Obviously, younger people are slightly more prone to this because they're more familiar with being students. More common would be for people to go into themselves in a number of different varieties. So #1 is probably just pretending that nothing's really happened, that you can just carry on as normal. Staying too sedentary. So it's easy to sit at my desk and do my work because no one's going to tell me off if I do too much work. And certainly for me, it's actually quite hard to go out and take the exercise that I'm being encouraged to do and will be encouraging you to do, because it feels like I'm breaking from work, as if I'm wasting time in some way. Another one that I see teams do is black and white, them and us thinking, othering in the jargon. because you only get to see your very, very close colleagues, usually the members of your team, it's easy to imagine that the members of other teams who may not be doing the tasks that you require of them are doing it for some sort of their rubbish, or they're doing it deliberately to annoy you, or those kinds of blaming that can easily arise between teams. You may also be drinking more. I certainly am. Not much, I'm a terrible lightweight, but it's only problematic if you start to drink to numb yourself, numb what you're feeling, or in order to bring yourself down to relax, because those kinds of uses of drinking are essentially forms of self-medication. You're using it instead of medical drugs. Kind of ditto for unhealthy eating, and for unnecessary self-isolating. And then finally in this category is a sense of being persistently tired. Now, part of that is because, as several of the other speakers have alluded to, the video conferencing meetings are very, very tiring. It's the end of the day. You're listening to me. You're not having to interact. You can only see part of me in this. You can't really gauge my whole body experience from this. You may or may not be able to see my hands wave, and I'm quite energized by this whole thing. It is all just energy sapping. Now, the good news is there are lots of experts in social isolation, astronauts and submariners and less helpfully prisoners and nuns and monks, who do understand what it is that helps them in this. Exercise, number one, as Kat alluded to at the beginning of this, your brain is not just chauffeured around by your body. Your body's not just a brain carrier. The two are intimately linked. And if you move your body, you will move emotionally your brain. Sleep, relaxation, and a strong routine, all of those three come together really powerfully to affect your mood. Positivity, not in a kind of Pollyanna, oh, it's all going to be wonderful, because it's not. Thousands of people, tens of thousands of people have died as a consequence of this. But unplugging yourself from all the death news, you know, it's easy to get wrapped up in how dreadful Trump is performing in America, or the Brazilian guy is going slightly odd over there, but actually they have really nothing to do with me in the short term, and I can just let that go. And also trying to reframe things, take the same event and literally put it in a different frame. In Singapore, they called it circuit breaking rather than lockdown, because lockdown sounds rather imprisoning and focuses on the negativity of what you've not got, freedom, where circuit breaking is positive and draws your attention to the benefit, the good that you're doing by staying at home and working. I would also argue that this is not much of a fun time. And so paying attention to your inner child and giving it some positive strokes by being silly and playing games, by taking time to be off or alone. Some people swear blind to the value, for example, of meditation. I'm too mentally on all the time to enjoy it myself. Or your hobbies, particularly if your hobbies don't have a point to them. They're not, you know, oh, I must learn French because I've always had that in my mind, as opposed to, I just want to do pottery because it feels nice. And I would also encourage doing this kind of exercise routinely, accounting for what's going on. What are your feelings? Feelings are a bit like the weather. Again, as Kat alluded to, you know, the dark clouds can come, but then they pass, and just notice, you know, when it's feeling sunny, when you're not feeling sunny, in a non-judgmental way. Notice the strains that you're carrying for yourself, for your partner, for your children, for your vulnerable loved ones, for your own managers up, or for your teams going down the hierarchy. What's the load? What can you put down and what can you prioritize? Notice what you've lost. not in a kind of mawkish, tearful way, but in a, well, if I've lost that, is there anything I can do to, you know, substitute? And God, I really miss going to cafes. And, you know, I find myself looking at, you know, YouTube videos to try and use my little coffee machine in imaginative ways to, you know, make up for a little bit of that. It's a second-rate experience, but at least it's something. And notice the signs of when you're not doing so well. What happens to you? I know if I'm not enthused with my games, which is one of the ways I am silly, then that's probably a clue that something's going on. And what's likely to trigger you into not going so well? I'm a big fan of journaling. I fill in one every day using my little journaling app. And at the start of this process, I was surprised, but not surprised, to actually see quite how clearly my mood was going down on average. And I looked at various things I was doing, and suddenly I was watching telly an awful lot more. I mean, that's fine. You know, you're at home. You can't go out to dinner. You can't go out for so many things. Watching a bit of telly is fine, as long as it's done consciously. And you think, yeah, am I watching too much and with all of this? My ability to relax had gone down. Now, partly that's because I was pouring energy into my partner as she went through her ups and downs. My chores shot through the roof. My laundry's never been so in control as it is now. And the number of great meals that we have together has, you know, taken a bit of a dip, obviously. So just notice some of the stuff that's going around. Using this, I was able to take some corrective action, and at the end of April, you know, perked up a bit through some of that. Oops. Over on the work side, we've already mentioned the importance of flexible kinds of working and the real importance of meeting hygiene and the workload. So I'm not going to labor that. I would just like to point to this one really, which is notice the kind of people you work with. You know, this is not great time to be an extrovert. It's rubbish. Extroverts are fueled, rocket fueled by their contact with other people. They're stimulated, they're excited, they flourish in situations like this and in situations with other people. And in situations like this, where they're in forced exploration, they tend to wilt. Likewise, you know, what a great time to be an introvert. Truly a great strength. Something that's often poo-pooed has become a great strength. But even the introverts will struggle, particularly with video conferencing as a mechanism, having to look at other people all the time and not get the full, rich information from people's bodies. Makes it really, really hard, because your body is constantly on. It's trying to constantly get those signals from other people to see how they're doing so that they can match moods with you, and getting a thin, rubbishy substitute from it. And your ambiverts, the people halfway between extroverts and introverts, like myself, you just need to be aware of your flow. So I really love presenting. I find it exciting. I love giving people information and ideas and then having a conversation about it afterwards. And then I have to go and sit in a quiet room and do some spreadsheet noodling for a day or two to recover from, you know, being a bit burnt out from all of that. So these ways, these various things that are going on, helpful and unhelpful but forgivable ways of coping, are all ways to try and push back on the mental poorly states that we could get into, and ways of just acknowledging this whole big world of stuff that's going on. A mechanism that I like, that a colleague of mine found, a link to this board will be shared with you, and it includes links to things like this remote work canvas, is a really great conversational piece. And that conversation can be with yourself, or your team, or I would strongly suggest with your partner, particularly if your partner is working with you or near you. You don't have to fill the whole thing in. You just pick one or two that seem problematic or seem to be things that you hadn't really consciously talked about. Because not consciously talking about stuff is the worst way in which you can bury the problems that you're likely to have. And those problems are likely to leak in some form. I found myself, for example, not noticing how angry I was getting at people in the supermarket queue outside Sainsbury's who couldn't seem to follow a simple 2 meter, distancing thing, for God's sake. And I, would deploy my tutty, flouncy anger at them through the medium of glaring eyes, and then think, oh, hang on, I'm feeling quite angry about this. What's that going? What's happening for me? And what do I need to address? Because there's something bubbling under the surface. And I've taken some holidays during this period in order to rest from it and have some space, again, because of a sense of I was getting overwhelmed. So have a conversation with your partner, have a conversation with yourself, and just check in with yourself and look at some of these and think how you're doing, or use it in structured team events to discuss stuff. And then finally, I would encourage you to have permission to be a bit suboptimal. It's a broken world. It's not our normal world. We're doing our best, but we're not going to be at 100%. We're just not. And there's no use pretending. We'd be placing ourselves into unwarranted stress if we imagined that it's all going to be just as it was before, with no bumps and no difference. Yes, we've been succeeding beyond the expectations of people who didn't believe that home working was a sensible and viable way to work, but it does come with baggage, particularly when that baggage is the rest of the world around us is closed or nearly closed. So don't expect too much of yourself, don't expect too much of your teams. Give yourselves all collectively some slack. It's a hard time. People liken it to war. As well as a therapist and a UX person, I'm a very keen military historian, and I can tell you it's not a war. Any poor bloody infantryman in the trenches would swap their life for our lives in the blink of an eye. But that's not to say it's not really, really difficult. So account for all of those difficulties, compare those difficulties to how you're coping with them, and have conversations with yourself, your partner, and your teams, and give yourself some permission to be less than marvelous in this less than marvelous time. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your questions or reflections. John.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was fantastic. If we can have the panelists back on your webcams and unmuted, that would be good. I'll just let that happen. And it's interesting that Robert says that it's okay not to be at 100%, but I'm absolutely certain that we'll all agree that our speakers absolutely have been 100%. Thank you for what you've imparted and shared with us. It's been absolutely fascinating. There was a question, I should say to everybody who's attending that the slides will be shared and the recording of this webinar will be shared after the event. There was a question that came in about, I suppose, a quarter or a third of the way through your exposition on the mind map, Robert, where it was all looking quite difficult, and essentially asking whether those things might just put a roadblock to prevent our headlong rush towards the new normal after all this is over. Can I ask each of you in turn, based on that, what your point of view about the future of remote working is and what it will be, how the balance will pan out between the air quotes working from home right through to what we're doing now, working at home in a crisis. Where will it end up, Robert?
Well, was that to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
unless you want to rest.
We're going to have a period of reflection. The old view that home working was second rate, I think, has been demolished. It's different, and it's got different flavors to it. I think a lot of people who wanted to homework and now experienced homework would quite like to do the office, but as long as the office is the real office and not the horrible sounding office with screens and one-way systems and all of that, which sounds absolutely ghastly. It'll unpack itself for a while, and we'll have to get back to normal with the normal world around it, but it's only going to increase, in my view.
Laura, what's your view?
I think the view, and I alluded it to me in the future, is that the corporate stigma for working from home will be removed, and it'll sort of widen our opportunities. So I think personally, I would never really want to work from home again. I absolutely love being in the office and seeing people, and I'm looking forward to my commuting. So I'll never moan about that again. And I think some people will probably go the complete opposite way. A lot of the developers on the teams have loved just having the headspace to get the head down and code. So I think it'll just give more options and give people the flexibility that they need, with the support of the corporate and the business side of things.
Kat, what's your view?
I think it gives us all a really great opportunity to design our own optimum kind of experience. So we can all become designers in understanding what works best for us and reflecting, as Rob encouraged us to. So reflecting on what works better for us as individuals. And then it gives, when we go back into our working lives, it gives, I really encourage all of the organizations to think about how they design the work experience going forward. We don't just have to go back to how it was before. We have this great opportunity to pause, reflect, reconsider, and think about how best to design the best possible organizational culture, the best possible organizational structure that will work for all the different people and all of their needs. But if we don't take that time to pause and reflect, we can just go back into the habits that we had before, because habits just form so quickly. So I think we really need to be intentional and constructive in how we think about going back. And if we are, it could be really, really great. We don't have to go back to the normal. We could go back to something better.
Shemek, what's your view?
I kind of agree with Kat here. I think it's will the stigma fade? I don't know. I think the outlook will change. I think there is elements, and there is still people who kind of break the trust by not working from home or not doing it as efficiently. And I think it will have to go hand in hand with actually, how do we measure? What are the KPIs? How do we actually, set out tasks for people? They have to be a bit more explicit when you work from home. And what do you need to, what do you need to complete today? What do you need to complete this week? Where you come into the office as, I have the 7 things that I need to work this week. I don't really matter kind of what way. So I think, with rethinking that, going into kind of agile type of way, do one task at the time, make sure you complete your field, fulfilled, and so on and so on. I think more people will have to bring that in to give some of the managers who still don't trust the working from home situation a bit more confidence that the work is happening and it's happening efficiently. And again, it has to, as Kat said, it has to be tailored to each organization. It will be different for each one.
Simeon, what's your view?
My view is a mixture of all of them, really, but I think it'd be really helpful if I sort of reference what we're looking at. And when we're talking about, planning for when people into the office, whenever that is, it's going to be, rather than just having office blocks full of people and back-to-back desks, which are pretty much our sales and service functions are. I think we're treating our office spaces as big meeting rooms now, where you can book them and effectively hot desk throughout the entire office. I think that's going to be part of the new normal, and it's about the keyword really being flexibility, where if you want to go into the office, you can do, and you can, go there for a bit of normality. But if you also need to get your head down, and like Laura said, for developers, get their head down on code, you can go work from home, but you can work from where you want to work, given the appropriate safety precautions are put in place. But I think it's more about being flexible about everybody's needs, and back to what everybody else was saying, that stigma from working from home. I don't think there's room for that stigma anymore, because I think that's not likely to change in some way, shape or form for a long time, really.
Let's just nail that question of productivity. There's been a lot of talk in the media about greater productivity and indeed less productivity while people are working from home. It may be that working at home during a crisis isn't completely representative, but what's your experience been, Simeon?
We've seen a complete mixed bag, to be honest with you, because when you talk about changing, there's that big thing about the change curve, how people adapt to change very differently. We've seen a lot of people. We've got a lot of service projects ongoing, internal service projects, which have just stalled for whatever reason. There's always been something else going on, because when you're in an office with everything going around, and people who work at a service organisation will get this. When something happens, you tend to drop everything and move on to it, because you need to be very reactive. And you can get distracted in the office as well as other bits and pieces. So there's a lot of stuff that we wanted to develop as a company in regards to internal processes, products, innovation, that sort of thing, that just never happened. What this has done for us is given people the time to just sit back, take a breather from what they have to worry about day to day normally, and to really put the foundations in for our business to go to that next level. Because to be quite honest, we know we are an IT reseller, and we have seen a drop in demand for some products, especially across some sectors as well. So it has given people time to just go, right, okay, I've been wanting to do this for a while, I can go and do it now. We have also seen the flip side of it, and it's all about checks and measures, and we have seen the flip side of it, which is where you've got to check in people numerous times a day just to make sure they are doing what they need to do, and it's just a case of finding the balance. Not just there isn't, in our experience, in my experience as well, there isn't one answer to fit everyone within the organisation. Everybody reacts differently. Everybody's got their own challenges. I mean, we've got people on the service desk where we say, as long as you work 7.5 hours a day, we don't particularly care about when you work it, as long as you work it, because you've got childcare to look after, you've got a dog to go walk, you've got all these things to look after, and it's a case of just being respectful and being flexible to accommodate it. But likewise, we've also got members of staff where they need to have that measurement, and you are at work at 9 o'clock and you finish at 5:30, and they work better if you make them stick to that rather than giving them flexibility, if that makes sense. So it's a real mixed bag, really, in short.
Thank you for that. Laura, what have you found in terms of productivity?
I think that it's been obviously challenging for people in the way that they're working, and I wouldn't say you could use this as a gauge to say what productivity is like for people, because it is completely different circumstances. But some people on my teams were doing even more work than they would have done before, because pulling together something like a roadmap remotely takes a lot more time than it does in the office. It would be probably one day. It's been like 12-hour days for them. When we first went into lockdown, the teams were doing 12-hour days, probably 5 days of the week. They were all burnt out, exhausted, and it's not how you would want them to work. But then on the flip side, when it comes to needing some time to do childcare and things like that, the flexibility is there. So from an output perspective from the teams, I couldn't fault them. I think that the productivity has been as much as you could expect it to be in the way that we're working right now. And across working from home, because my teams have worked from home for me for as long as I can remember, it's never been an issue. I've never had an issue with productivity, and I think that it all goes down to the trust of the people that are working for you, and the relationship with your line manager to know it's give and take on hours. I don't care what hours you're doing as long as the output that we need is there, and that's sort of the attitude that we've got at Mago. It's
interesting that you made the point in your talk that if you don't trust people, then they're on the wrong team. You shouldn't have them in your team.
Absolutely. If I didn't trust them, if I needed to put KPIs in place to know if somebody was doing the job properly, then I've got the wrong person.
Have you got any tips on how to build that trust between you and your colleagues?
I think that it's all about giving people the autonomy to work and letting them prove themselves and giving them the stretch and seeing them come back with the results. I would never be an advocate to micromanage until you can trust somebody. I would presume trust until somebody shows me that I can't trust them.
Is that your take on it, Robert?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Productivity, I think, is a red herring. The problem with working from home is motivation. And if your motivation sags for whatever reason, if you're just not into the work that much, then your productivity will suffer. So it's staying close to people. It's staying close to your manager, wanting to please your manager, wanting to show off. Think of the small child, you know, look what I've done, and getting praised for it and feeling good that you've done a good job. That's the thing that will keep you going. There's never any problem with productivity per se. You've got all the modern productivity tools you could wish for. It's having the oomph to sit there and do it and commit to it, and the passion and the reward from that really matter.
How's that played out for you, Shemek, over the last few weeks?
Well, so kind of two sides. So obviously we had a lot bigger proportion of our operations team is working from home than the rest of the business, and we found there is no difference in terms of the output. So different people work differently, but we across the business have the same amount of people who require some performance management and coaching and training, as and literally it's like 51 and 49%. So we've kind of we've been measuring that for over a year. So I think the issue is not with productivity and the tools. You might have to have a look at basically individuals, how they are motivated and if they can focus, they are self-starters, but also how the tasks are designed. So again, in the office, it might be easier for a manager to say, hey, PK, can you do this? And then an hour later, you can see they're doing something else. Can you go back to that one? And so on and so on. Where from home, you don't have that control. So restructuring, making sure that you tailor your expectation to the individuals you manage is very important. Some people will like freedom. Some developers that have, you know, here's your task for this week, here's your sprint, I'm taking the 3, and then you can forget about them and they'll come back and all singing, all dancing and introspective and it goes well. And there's some that you literally have to, you know, they're brilliant, but you have to check in with them every 2 hours. There will be different ways. I don't think the productivity as such will be impacted. I think it's the matter of how we look at as managers and as employees and how the work is structured and how we do it. And yes, motivation plays a big part there. That's, I think, my bit. We just need to think. We have to stop using what we know about home working and just have a look and start thinking from scratch in terms of what is the correct way, rather than, oh, we used to do it that way. It probably doesn't apply, especially if you want to do it long term. I myself worked for 7 months from home without any contact with any of the businesses for my current employer because of a certain situation, and yes, it's a problem, especially that the only contact you have a half-an-hour call with them in a week. So, but again, it will suit some, it won't suit the others. I don't think the productivity overall will be impacted. Someone mentioned the trust issue, and I think trust is a problem. Some people are more trustful, and again, if we can bring some frameworks and mechanism to show how the work will be managed and delivered, then I think the problem is with giving people that benefit of the doubt, and some managers will have that problem to take that step. So if we don't let them have the tools and the visibility into that to encourage them and say, give people a chance, I think that will be a main blocker here.
That's interesting. Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. We've got a lot of people, very interestingly, confessing to being quite relieved. They must be introverts, Robert, to not being visible, because, Kat, they were doing your stretches, and one or two have said they've been doing it throughout and they feel a whole lot better for it. But there's a question about how you initially get people to do that sort of thing, because in a live meeting or where they can be seen, they feel or might feel a little bit silly and self-conscious. How have you got over that with people? Have you encountered it?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it comes down to trust and having that psychological safety within the team to feel like you can be a bit silly. If you don't have that safety, if you don't feel like I can do this and they aren't just going to completely take the piss out of me, record it and secretly send it to everyone in the office, then of course you're not going to do it. So you need that psychological safety. But it's also, if you want to do it with your team, you really have to lead by example, and you really have to go into it with a huge amount of energy and enthusiasm, because if you're doing anything and you come out of that meeting thinking, you know, everyone was really demotivated and not very energized if it's a workshop, for example, that's really down to the facilitator. And if you're not bringing a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and kindness and consideration for different people, then they aren't going to be willing to do it. So just mind your language when you're introducing it, and make sure that it's like people can, they can't, and if they want to, they should, but if they don't, that's fine too. And just letting people know that it's okay if they don't want to, but just then doing it yourself and making it look as fun as possible so that they eventually do get around to doing it.
And I would just add to that, explain why you're doing it, that you want to lift the energy. And if you're super not comfortable with it, then pick someone in your team who is an extrovert and would be comfortable, and ask them a favor.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you everybody. I think what it illustrates as much as anything is that the technology has, well, it's come to the fore, is a great servant but not a master. The human beings and the leadership and the human interaction is absolutely paramount, and we've got a lot of steers and a lot of pointers from everything that you've said. The slides will be shared, the recording will be shared. Thank you very much to each of our speakers, and I look forward to the next in the series of BCS Elite events. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.